Hey, remember that thing I was supposed to make more of? Yeah. Here you go. I love video games, but do video games love me? I've always found that question burning at some place in my head when I was trying to get through Legend of Zelda, or Demon Souls, or anything else as it ripped through me like a meat slicer on little to no sleep after a toil of recent booze and depression. I felt the film on my eyes, and the only thing holding me back from sleep, from more booze, or from throwing myself in front of a train was the bliss of an end credit scene, or at least dodging enough attacks to kill the boss. I used to think because my peers and parental figures told me video games would rot my mind that it was true, and a validated excuse for why I shouldn't play them. I learned through excruciating pain caused by years of not speaking a word, traveling through hard environments and even harsher mindsets, that I missed video games, and that if I had a video game in that moment to play, maybe I wouldn't feel so fucking miserable. And it was true. Eventually, I found myself in front of the games I grew up with, one way or another, and it immediately made me feel comfortable, and it let my mind heal. So to answer the question before, do I think video games love me? Yeah, at least some of them, in some way. That loving comes from years of work developers put into coding those games, into crafting stories in which the only thing gamers normally digest from a game, besides the gameplay, of course, is the story. To which I say, I also played a game that I loved so much that I forgot human beings string themselves throughout excruciating workflow to give you the story and to give you the gameplay. This is when this video turns to just me speaking without a script. So I think a lot of pressure falls on video games to be better morally, where that isn't exactly that good of a thing. Because, so for one thing, video games, just like any other medium that involves some kind of like violent, it's hard to think of the word. Violent mediums do not make violent people. So in any occurrence that something inspired somebody to make or to commit a violent happening in the real world, that was because they were already disturbed. So what these things do for decent-minded people, and I'm not saying even neurotypical, but just decent-minded people with a morality, what these video games give to those people is a way to expose of these nasty feelings in a way that is, sometimes the only healthy way. Because in my own experiences, which may not reflect on you, and may not reflect on everyone, or anyone for that matter, because it's mine, it's that I found that video games, when I'm really into them, when I'm just allowed to cause all sorts of mayhem, I end up smoking cigarettes less. I end up drinking less. I end up not giving in to hateful remarks the next day. And maybe not remarks, because I don't really do that much, or at all. But I guess selfish and or aggressive behavior, as in being passive-aggressive or being snappy. I have a lot of issues with anger, but with video games, it actually eases it. And it's not a toxic relationship, because the video game loves that I do that. That's its whole purpose for existing, like as a thing that you can indulge yourself in. So my point here is, with the second video on trauma related to video games, I think that video games are a way to deal with trauma, whether it be a peaceful video game that lets you resonate, lets you meditate on some things that have hurt you, through a peaceful measure, a relaxing video game like Tetris, maybe Pong, or Minecraft even, or Terraria, or Animal Crossing. Those are good examples of peaceful medium for video games. Not all video games are violent, but for me, I prefer the more violent video games because I had a pretty violent upbringing. I mean, of course, somebody could have a violent upbringing without playing these violent video games, instead playing the peaceful games, because that's just the way that they heal. But for me, I think all these, news stories, and whether it be some stupid liberal news network or some stupid conservative network, trying to shove down your throat that video games are evil and they cause kids to shoot up schools, or they cause kids to go out and commit the same thing that they see in the video game, or that they embellish themselves within. I think that is all incredibly ridiculous because, I have violent tendencies, but I never act on them because I have a little thing called art to have my back and to expose myself to, whether it be by listening to music or playing a video game. So for me, I think one of the most beautiful things in my recent life have been the love I've shared with partners and friends, but also playing video games. And I think that once people open up to the genuine fact that video games can help people recover from mental, at least from the bad parts of mental illness, then maybe we can start making better video games. But I'll tell you a little story. I used to play a lot of Halo 3, and I played a lot of Dark Souls. So Dark Souls 1 and Halo 3 were my go-tos for getting rid of all this aggravation. So it's an entirely separate dealing of what I was going through at the time, like with both games, because with Halo 3 it let me enact these things without a specific target, but with a very broad term via enemies and multiplayer that I could shoot at. They looked like me. It was fine. But with Dark Souls, it was more like so the difficulty in Dark Souls is insanely high, and that comes from how it feels, at least for me, when I play it. It feels like actually getting over an issue. It feels like you're attaching or projecting some of your internal issues onto the game, and they are pretty difficult to get over. Even without the game. But with the game, you have something to attach that to, image-wise and difficulty-wise, because before that I didn't really have a game. Every game was kind of easy to me, and it didn't feel like getting over something, at least fairly. And so you play through Dark Souls and you just get better and better at closing out this idea in your head. And at least me, I gotta keep saying that because not everybody's going to have the exact same experience. But I also think that Dark Souls is much more a work of art than say big budget Call of Duty games are nowadays, because Call of Duty is about immediate satisfaction, immediate input satisfaction. So you go in, you get a kill, you don't get a kill, whatever it may be, you're going to get one of those eventually. And it's going to feel very hand-holdy. It's going to feel like it was given to you, even if you feel like you've earned it, it doesn't meet that gratifying over arc of, hey, I'm struggling with something, I'm projecting that onto the video game, and it actually feels worthwhile to complete that. It is a type of meditation in a way, though it does require insane amount of categorizing something and directly targeting those things. But, you know, I think that's going to do it for part 2. I don't really have much else to say. I feel like I'll probably do another one of these things if you guys like it. If you don't, you know, give me some tips for how to make it more relatable or whatever. I don't mean that. Give me tips for how maybe I could make it feel better to listen to if that's an issue. Anyway, love you guys. Have a good night. Thanks for listening.